Welcome to the Devhouse Agency Podcast, your window into the Metaverse. I'm Jim Welch, and once again with me is Devin Cole. Hey, Devin.
Howdy.
So today we have Graeme Devine on with us in a little bit, and we're going to talk about cool video game stuff. Graeme's worked on a lot of neat projects, and so we're really excited to talk with him later. But let's dive into the news. So, news today. I have tried this actually in open beta, but Meta has now released Horizons as open. I don't know if it's open beta, but it's open and available for download. I would assume it's still beta, just because it's like the life cycle, right? It's like you go private beta, then you go public beta, and then you go full release, right?
And you could infinitely for a long time just say that Meta is in beta, and it just sounds cool, so
right.
It works.
Meta beta, yeah, that's just fun to say. So if you don't know about Horizons, it's a VR world. Think of Roblox or any sort of like user content created type space. Horizons is big on that. So you get kind of tool sets that you can use, which are fairly limited, and then the creators can build spaces that you can visit. So you can go and you can play like kind of mini games, but mostly those mini games are limited by the sort of restricted palette of world building. So
is it like Rec Room? It just visually, this looks like a paintball match in Rec Room.
Yes. And actually the screenshot that I'm seeing here, I don't remember playing anything like that when I played Horizon, and it's been a couple months.
Yeah.
It was mostly for me like a walking adventure, walking sim. It's like, okay, I can look at your space. Oh, wow, that's really clever that you use those two primitives to make a fish and like that kind of stuff. And there were some more slightly gamified experiences, but it was kind of like Roblox, where it's like, well, jump on that or talk to that person and they give you a simple response, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's probably going to get way more fun, I guess, as more people get into it, because like Roblox was kind of primarily a children's game,
right? Until
people started making Counter-Strike and Doom in Roblox.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear Graeme's thoughts on that. So I think it's cool. I'm glad it's out. I think more VR experiences, especially communal experiences, will be good for the world of VR, AR, and the metaverse. It's yet to be seen if people will like it, but with Roblox blowing up, I think it's more of the same, but now in VR.
Yeah, with so many metaverses kind of entering the space and coexisting, it's good to see that Facebook Meta's Metaverse is kind of just showing up. It's here, and it's legit. It's stable. There's no speculation around it. You can get into it now, and you can experience it now. There's no cost of entry, no direct tie to NFTs, but they might eventually sell NFTs in the space, depending on how the space works.
Right. I do remember a specific story I had, or an experience I had when I first hopped into Horizon. I had a friend invite me to the closed beta, and I put it on. I was like, cool, I'm gonna check this out. And the moment I warp in, someone from then Facebook, now Meta, asked me like, hey, do you have any questions? Because it was still closed beta, so it was personalized. It's like, no, I'm good, thank you. And then people started just talking to me, and I felt really uncomfortable. It's like, hey, are you new here? And I was like, I didn't expect to have to talk to strangers. And
well, you get the same thing in VR chat or Rec Room. As soon as you customize your character and you hit the go button, you're in. There's people everywhere, and they're doing weird things and saying weird things to each other, and you just have to go kind of get involved.
Yeah, it definitely, like, from the pandemic introvert-y space, I was very much thrown into the deep end. But I think once I found my friend in there, and then he gave me a tour, so to speak, at different spaces, and then it was pretty fun. So yeah, check it out if you have a VR headset. It's called Horizon, and it's now open for US and Canada. So all right, well, let's talk about some gear.
Oh, this is my favorite part. Here we
go. I'm gonna rotate this, probably blocking one of my cameras, but I'll let Devin control the mannequin head and talk about what this is, Devin.
So, at face value, this is an airsoft helmet or a paintball helmet, depending on what you want to use it for, right? And we've got an arm on top attached to it that is just a really solid arm. The goal of it is to hold an iPhone so that we can use this face cap software to do motion capture of characters' faces for some of the various things that we've created.
Yeah, look at the hamburger talking. That's precious.
Yeah, so we've got a couple experiences now that we use this whole suite of tools to kind of motion capture speech, emotion, just about anything the face can do. And so it's kind of a full, well-rounded end-all solution for how do we do character faces.
Right. And it's interesting that we can just use, like, I'm gonna kind of hold my iPhone up to it. So like the iPhone would go there.
Yep.
And basically, yeah, you just use the fancy cameras that now Apple put out so we can do the like sort of what is it called? Animojis, or I can't remember what they call them.
I think it is Animojis.
Yeah, so all the Animojis.
Memojis.
Okay. And so yeah, like all that meme emoji that read your face. Well, we use that technology, we put the camera there, it looks at your face, and that's why you have this arm. And then we just feed that into Unity, and we can do all sorts of fancy stuff with it. But yeah, and this is all off the shelf stuff that we bought. We just got like kind of a kit, like, hey, like here's a list of things, and I purchased it all and we put it together.
You can see we've got up top a Vive tracker. We did some actual full body motion capture using Vive trackers. Eventually we switched to an image based system, but this was essentially so that you could still track the head while doing all of your facial animation, so that there was no separation between the body tracking and the face tracking.
Right. Yeah. So you'll wear this, and then we use some other stuff we talked about in another episode to track your body, and then you get the whole shebang. And so we did this most recently, I think, for probably Augmented History app. And so there's an app called Augmented History plug. And actually, it's called Heritage. That's if you want to search it for on the store. Our kind of internal name is Augmented History, but the formal name is Heritage, spelled with an AR, so Heritage. And you can learn, listen to some of the presidents speak, and as we're developing more features, currently the latest release adds Paul Revere's ride, and you can kind of watch Paul Revere's ride happen in AR. But we use this for the actors to when they read the voiceover lines. So like when Abe Lincoln was reading his lines, we had this in the actor's face being captured, and we were able to use this. So,
and it was all live, so you could see your own face changing the face of the character as you're speaking, so that you know how to perform better or worse with your face and how that affects the character, so that you can modify your performance and your voice to how it moves the actual character.
Right. Sweet. Well, yeah, so that's super fun, and we plan to use this headset a lot more. So if you have a cool facial capture stuff, give us
Unity
a call.
has a new software that uses the exact same system. Our headset will not change, but the way that we integrate it into Unity will.
Gotcha. Well, excited to try that out.
Yeah, it'll be really fun.
Well, let's dive into our Dev Abomination.
I get to plug Christian. Christian, who was Christian hosted last time, right?
Yes. Yeah, he was on our last episode. Yeah, he was our co-host.
This is Christian's game, just released, now available on itch.io, called Auto Fantasy.
Yes.
And what we're looking at, one of our engineers, Liam, this was him brutally tearing the game apart and breaking it with an auto clicker. So Auto Fantasy is kind of an RPG that plays itself with minimal interaction on your desktop over all of your other applications. So it's kind of the idea was while we were sitting here at Devhouse doing our work, we've got these dudes fighting on our screen, kind of running their own RPG in the background as something to kind of, when we get bored and need to take a minute to look at something, we can like buy an extra unit for our army. But Liam had managed to trick the game into letting him buy infinite blue guys. So your characters are blue, and they're just standard RPG, like mage, like white mage, black mage. There was rogue, an archer, rogue, and like a warrior. And your party is supposed to be something like 4 or 5, and we can't count how many there are, but as there became more blue guys on the screen, the game was just automatically pumping out more enemies per party member, and it gloriously broke.
And I think the computer started to chug a bit, or at the very least, the application began to chug.
There's the little developer console debug log that was just kind of saying, "No, we don't like this anymore. We don't know what we're doing."
Please stop. Yeah, and so we thought this was a fun one to share today. We always try to tie in some sort of like nugget of wisdom of like, here's a funny thing that happened, and here's why it happens, and here's what we do to avoid that. And so I think this is a good segue into talking about sort of like unloading assets, right? So like you don't want to keep all those dudes, on the screen if they're dead or whatnot, right?
Yeah. One of the projects I've been working on, we recently had to figure out how we're handling textures loading and unloading from memory, because we're dynamically doing it from the web and we can't download them onto our disk for easier management of loading and unloading. They have to be downloaded at the immediate web request, and there was no limit to how many we could have, so we had to find a way to optimize how we're loading and unloading these things. And it became a huge kind of fire that had to be put out, because we were loading all of the images and it would just crash the target device, because we were trying to build for Quest and there's basically no memory on the device.
Yeah. Texture limits are big on Quest, on VR devices in general, but Quest, because it's a mobile, non-tethered.
Yeah.
You only have so much RAM, and RAM gets hit really hard when you load textures.
Yeah. And then we solved that, and then the next problem was we're not unloading them.
Right.
So we managed to find a way to quickly compress all of the images on load time that was optimized on the GPU, and that was awesome and it would work. But then we would quit the experience and kind of back out to hey, let's load the next one, and all of the textures and images from the previous one were still in memory. So as soon as you start loading that again, it crashed.
Yep.
Because you're stacking more on top. So we then had to go, okay, we got to go back and take some steps back to like make sure that we're cleaning that memory out before we keep going.
Yep. Yeah, you get some what they call garbage collection automatically, and that kind of will clear stuff out. But then some things just, they live in memory because it thinks it's trying to help you. It's like, well, you might need this texture again, so let me hold on to it for you. And so you have to deliberately say, no, get out of here, I don't want you.
Yeah. And Unity doesn't like you to touch the garbage collector. So in reality, what you have to do is kind of tell the garbage collector that it can do its job on this stuff. So you're just kind of like, okay, we're done with this. We destroyed it. Now go garbage collect.
Yeah. You have permission. So that's fun. Auto Fantasy, I think, is $4. So go to itch.io, get it.
It's on sale for $3 right now.
Oh, sale.
It might have been yesterday. I don't know about today.
That $1 might lose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Like we just leave it on our screen, and then when you're bored, especially if you're like working from home, it's still something to do. And also it's cool that Unity, there's a way to build desktop toys. So like you think of Unity as a game engine that takes up your whole screen. It's like, no, you can build experiences where you have a little. I always think of the cat chasing the mouse. When I was a kid, that it would chase your digital mouse, and it's like, oh, I get it. He's chasing a mouse.
I think the closest thing that I had to a desktop toy was in elementary school, seeing Clippy in Microsoft Word for the first time.
Yeah. Clippy's pretty much. I mean, he's over Word, but I think you could drag him outside, he operates on top of everything. So awesome. Okay, well, we'll end our abomination there, and welcome our guest today, Graeme Devine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Graeme. We got you muted, Graeme. Let's make sure that you're unmuted on your side and we didn't break it on ours.
There's no exact science.
I was muted.
There we are. Okay, cool. Perfect. I was like, I hope we didn't, because we have like 2 engineers back there, and I didn't know if I had to yell at them. But so, we got you. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's wonderful to be able to chat with you. I'm super excited to dive in. Before we do that, I'd love for all of our listeners to kind of know more about what you do. You've done some really cool stuff, and you're up to some new very cool stuff.
Yeah, well, I've been making video games for quite a long time. I started on a TRS-80, which was a computer that came out in the 1970s. I worked at Atari, where I made the home computer versions of Pole Position back in the 1980s. Then I worked on a Ball Blazer back for Lucasfilm. Back when Lucasfilm Games was Lucasfilm Games, worked on various ports of that. Then I started some companies in the UK and did some games there, including a game called Metropolis, which was a PC game. I made that in 1987, which was a PC adventure game. And then moved to the States in 1988, joined Virgin Games. Then I started my own company in Oregon, made a game called Seventh Guest, which was kind of popular. It kind of kicked off the CD-ROMs a little bit. That and Myst were kind of the 2 big games that people love to claim. Well, I have this new computer and it does lots of things. Called the encyclopedia is the main reason I bought it, but also Seventh Guest.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it was really the other way around.
Yeah, no, that
Um,
was fun. I was telling Devin before the episode that I remember playing Seventh Guest with my dad because it was kind of scary, and so I was like played with my dad, and also some of the puzzles were pretty tough, and so I was doing my best to solve them. But yeah, I vividly remember some of the paintings that come to life and the
yeah,
chessboard, and yeah, it was it's that whole like most houses when I was a kid had like a computer room, and so you'd have like a computer on a desk somewhere, and you'd go there to play. But I'm going back into my memories. Please continue.
we would actually have people write us and tell us how they were solving the puzzles, and quite a few people learned how to program. That they would learn, programming to solve the puzzles, and they would send it in. It's like, look, I made this program to solve the puzzles for you.
Oh, that's funny.
And it was great because that was the way that they actually got into the industry, was by writing these programs to go solve the cake puzzle.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
they were writing in with the solutions.
That's amazing.
After Seventh Guest was 11th Hour. That was the sequel to Seventh Guest, and then games like Clandestiny, and then I went to id Software, and that was Quake 3, and that game was one of the first games that was big on the internet. It kind of required the internet.
And so you presumably were near us at that time, because so we're in Dallas. So
Yep.
I assume you were living out here somewhere near Dallas probably at that time.
I was in Rockwall and working right down the road in Mesquite. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
it is off of Greenville.
Yeah.
Which is like the road that I take to work every day.
Yep. Yeah. So hometown hero.
So yeah, that was a ton of fun. After it, it's Ensemble Studios and lead designer on Halo Wars, on the Halo RTS game. So that was kind of an interesting experience to go from the first non-Bungie Halo game, which was, because Halo, of course, started out as an RTS game, and it then became a first-person shooter game, originally on the Mac G3, and then became famously Xbox exclusive.
Right.
But taking it back to the RTS was, in the eyes of the Bungie fans, was a Bungie job.
Yeah.
So it was.
So they felt that was kind of a betrayal, but
I think I did okay in the
Yeah.
end. Yeah. Initially there was some pushback, and they can be quite vocal.
Yeah, gamers are very critical.
Yes.
And then Apple helped on the iPad, and helped with a lot of games on the iPad, and making games work, and thinking about the touch screen, and thinking about touch in games, and persuading people that you didn't have to have joysticks or virtual joysticks.
Yep.
And that latency was really a thing that we had to look at, on touch especially. And so that was a lot of my work at Apple. After Apple, I kind of retired. I was pretty happy. And then one day, a man called Ronnie Abowitz called me up and said, "I think I need a games guy." So for the last 7 years, I was the wandering wizard at Magic Leap. And that meant that I got to think about AR and VR, and mostly AR, not really so much VR, but AR in the real world through the Magic Leap system, at the Magic Leap 1, and what that meant to have an everyday device, because Ronnie was convinced it was an everyday device that you'd wear all the time eventually. And so I spent 7 years thinking about that. And then last year, tragically, COVID hit, and all the projects, we were about to launch a project at the Royal Shakespeare Company. We were working with the UN on climate change, and we were weeks away from launching a version of A Midsummer's Night Dream. Weeks away.
That's rough.
And COVID hits, and it all went away.
Right.
But the people I was working with, I loved so much. I believe you talked to out to Austin, and you talked to a few people from QXR. We founded a company called Quarantine Studios, because we were all over the world. That eventually became QXR Studios, and we just launched Metropolis Origins, which is the beginning of a reboot of my 1987 game, Metropolis, which brings the narrative IP into the 2020s. And we looked to expand that narrative IP, first with the card game, second with the PC game, with a Snapchat push into the narrative IP, and I want it to end up being, a weekly HBO show, a comic, everywhere. I want that narrative to be pushed out into the world. My version of the metaverse.
Yeah, that's amazing. Something in your sort of professional history stood out to kind of something I wanted to talk about today, which was while you were at Apple and you were talking about how you wanted to move away from like the digital joystick, which it was sort of the non-idiomatic, like, hey, just throw the thing on, put the joystick on the screen. That I think most of us, quote, gamers kind of are like, yeah, that's kind of silly. So you're like, hey, no, we should cater to the device and create experiences for that device. So what we're looking at now, and I mean it's been happening, but more as this whole meta thing grows and metaverse thing grows, is how do you build experiences for VR, or with probably more in line with your experience for AR, that are idiomatically, that are built for AR? Like what is an example of like a feature or something that you think is important to consider when designing those experiences?
I, I think the biggest thing is always using context with the world. I
Sure.
think that is anytime you're in AR, it's and you come up and you make something which is faked. Use this thing that's hanging in the air, and when there could be something right around you that's you know is there to use this better. Instead, use the darn table for the inputs. Don't just come up and just wave something in front of you that's a fake table. Put people on chairs, put people put people into the environment. um the, in, so much of AR is just today, it's better in VR. It's just a VR thing that people just say is AR, but it's just AR because it's not got a skybox around it.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it's AR without skybox, it's just really pointless. And I
Yeah.
think there's just a lot of pointless AR that's around today.
Yeah, so it's considering your environment, considering the real world, maybe considering less digital items. So instead of, as you said, like, use the actual table, don't put a fake table in the scene if there could be a real surface they could use. I think when we were talking to Dave, we were talking about how, like, a bouncy ball is a good example of like bouncing the ball off of surfaces that exist in your real space. Devin, what do you feel would be like a really good example of like an AR design that utilizes space?
So I think, was it, I don't remember when it was that the last episode that I was on was, but we looked at that experience that was made by Facebook Labs that was built for the Oculus Quest, and it uses pass through so that you can see the environment around you. But your physical table got mapped into the game, and you can play chess on that table or any other various board games.
Yeah, it's like you have all the boxes that board games would take up, but now they're just in this one headset, and you can sit down with somebody.
It became this party experience that you could sit at the table. It tracked your hands, so you could pick up fake pieces but place them on the real table. Or if you needed to like type something or write something, it would be projected on the table, and you could type on it like it was your actual keyboard, but it was just the table.
Yeah.
And then you could have real friends in the actual space that were also wearing the headset, and they were sitting right next to you, and you could see them, and you could mess with a slider that would switch between them and their VR avatar. So that was kind of,
I don't like the way you look. Let me see your
yeah.
I want virtual you.
I want the fake one that actually like looks better.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting idea of like, maybe in the future we can decide what we want to see around us, right? I'm thinking, 10, 20 years at least, probably. But, maybe if I really like dogs, like, I don't like people. Everyone's a dog. So you're like, everyone has dog faces that I look like, right? So that it's an interesting idea, and maybe dangerous, because maybe people build in biases, right? So I'd be curious what you feel about that, Graeme. The idea of sort of like building in control over your real world that's maybe not so much a game, but just affecting your reality with MR and AR.
Well, that's one of the first things that we thought about was, how do I Harry Potter my world? Just how do I, change that? And it came down more to, how do I do just a little bit of that, but how do I bring more the narrative of that to my world? Not necessarily, changing all the visual aspects of it, But the more important part was actually to change the context of what I'm actually doing in it. So just changing it visually, easy, and I can go and and have my Harry Potter world or my Star Wars world or my dog world. But making it interesting actually means making sure that everything kind of obeys the rules of Harry Potter world, or dog world, and Star Wars world, so that I am still believing that I'm actually somewhere in the world that is obeying these rules of being in this different world, in this different metaverse. And I think that's kind of the interesting work that's not being done today. I don't think anyone's doing that.
That's something I've seen. Kind of, it's not quite fully fledged in the ways of kind of making sure it feels realistic to the world, but in there are some VR games that are kind of taking the extra step, because most VR games are just, we can track your head and we can track your hands. But then there's some studios like Stress Level Zero that made Boneworks, that they try to accurately represent your entire body and how your body would interact in a virtual world with realistic physics. How do we convey that to the player if you can't physically touch something? They did a lot of really cool physics simulation and changes of how do I make something feel heavy that I'm not actually holding.
Right. Yeah, haptics are so interesting, and I think are super important to kind of crossing that line of simulation.
Yeah, we're starting to learn what can we do to trick the brain, right? Because at first VR and kind of AR, depending on how much visual field you're blocking, at first was like, I don't want to touch it, I'm gonna throw up, I'm getting seasick from putting this headset on. But now we're to a point where Stress Level Zero can do something like you're holding a heavy mallet or like a gigantic claymore knight's sword and you're swinging it around, but you're just kind of doing the whole flailing of your arms. And one of the early things in like melee combat games was that, how do we keep the player from just acting like they're waving a magic wand and that kills the enemy, because you technically hit them over and over and over. And so they addressed that by, the arms in the game could only do what a person could physically do. And so they would try to match you, but if you did the full swing instantly fast, the arms would only try its best to follow that with physical constraints. And with that, we started to learn that it doesn't have to be one-to-one. One of the early things that people kept trying to say, like, these are the rules of VR. And the first thing that people said was, your hands have to be one-to-one. The controller has to match the real controller one-to-one. And as soon as somebody broke that rule, it got really fun. Everything kind of got more realistic, even though that was what was assumed to be the fakest immersion breaking thing you could do.
Right. I think to sort of segue that idea of rules and sort of design changing over the years, Graeme, you've been doing this for a long time. Have you noticed that, you have to follow trends despite your design desires, or do you like to go against the curve? We've talked a lot recently about like how different monetization stuff, right? Like NFTs are a big popular monetization thing now. So there's always like the industry, momentum and influence. How do you feel like you interact with that?
I feel like you're not doing something right if people aren't telling you that you're doing it wrong. When I was making Seventh Guest, I would have most of the game industry tell me what I was doing was impossible. I remember famously interacting with Chris Crawford, who was a very famous game designer, and he was like, "Graeme can't do this; it's impossible." And even now with with Metro Origins, that uses NFTs, and there's pushback. I've actually lost friends over it because it uses NFTs, and the immediate pushback is, "Oh, the blockchain is burning the planet. It's there's no reason to have blockchains in games." And no, that's the immediate pushback of, yep, I have now worked on this, and that is not necessarily true. You need to go, and I've looked at the 14-page PDF that you respond to me with, and it's frustrating that that we live in a world where it's where innovation is not necessarily always encouraged, and that's a new design can't be tried. Something can't be seen as different and yet worthwhile trying before it's like, oh, that didn't work. Right. I'll fail 100 times quite happily.
Sure.
That's.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually something that I'd love to dig into, because we've recently started to explore the NFT space as well, and many of us are a part of an indie community here in Dallas, and that indie community, amongst most indie communities, are very against NFTs and kind of anything monetization focused, which NFTs kind of come with that, with all the money that's going around and the kind of insane, like, $500,000 for virtual land and these kind of things. I think it spurs a sort of like, big business vibe that scares people away. You mentioned some of the environmental impacts. Is environmental kind of the core pushback you've seen? Or are there other concerns that people have that you've ran into? Talk to me about sort of that pushback and experience you've had with the NFT space.
Oh, it's twofold. There's the there's the environmental pushback, and then there's the feeling that it's a scam.
Yes.
Those are kind of the two things that that we get the most. We're like, the environmental pushback is, yes, if you use some blockchains, absolutely, that they are the cost of proof on Bitcoin or Ethereum is through the roof. So yep, don't use those blockchains.
And do you know from your experience what makes a specific blockchain less environmentally friendly? Is it popularity? Because obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum are huge. Is it as they get bigger, they're more expensive to mine and to proof?
We use the Wax blockchain, which has a very different system for its and it passes around its proof of contract between guilds. So a different guild every month does a proof, so that that proof pool is a lot smaller. And so as the guilds change monthly, then that guild is trusted to be the one that does the approval. So proof on it is less than a Google search. So yay.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, important to point out that there's other ways to do things. And so if you immediately cut out something as a categorically bad and just say these things are bad, well, then that doesn't leave room to innovate. And as you just described, it's like, oh, that's a different way to do proofing that is a little more environmentally conscious, and there could be other ways we discover in the future as well. And so yes, I think these things are very important to explore, and we just have to do the best we can as we're exploring them, not to exploit or intentionally do sort of bad karmic things.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Graeme.
Oh no, it's the same. You can do bad things in anything.
Yeah, it doesn't.
There is people that do very bad things on the App Store, and and you read about those, and then you're like, oh my God, they're taking advantage of. Apple eventually catches up and stops them, and it's like, but that's like 2 days after they've made $40 million.
Yeah. The NFT isn't the scam. It's whatever they decide to do with the NFT that becomes the scam, and people are associating because it's new and it's the latest thing that's unexplored, and people aren't very educated in it. It's very easy to scam somebody. Just like early on, when phone games weren't really a thing, as they started coming out, you could have a game on your phone that ended up scamming you into putting your credit card in so that they could just take your money. Whereas nowadays it's not common, and phone apps aren't known for scams anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because when I hear the argument of oh, it's a scam, it's most of the NFT projects I've seen, and I don't dive deep into the weeds too far, so I don't know that maybe there's a really gross, seedy underbelly. But what I've seen is they don't really make promises of being something they aren't. It's like, here is a thing, you can buy it or you can't, and someone else, the person buying it, decides, oh, this is going to make me money. And then if it doesn't, then they feel scammed. But I don't feel like the NFT projects I've seen have claimed that like this is a good investment choice. Like spend your money because you'll make money.
Yeah.
That can be risky and scammy.
And I've seen some projects outright state, we don't claim the value of this. It is entirely speculative. And if you want to buy this as an investment choice, we encourage you not to.
Right. And yeah, and I kind of I'm in that same line. So we're working on some NFT stuff here. We're looking at the space, but I don't own any NFTs right now because I invest into my business, and so all my money comes back into Devhouse. And so I don't see it as like an investment opportunity. I see it as an interesting space to work in. And so yeah, it's really in the eye of the beholder, I feel. Would you agree to that, Graeme? What are your thoughts on sort of people who feel like it's a scam?
Oh, I think it's exactly that. I mean, there's bad humans out there, and I think it depends on the model that you embrace. We've embraced a Magic the Gathering model. We like the fact that you can go to Walmart or Target and buy a Magic the Gathering pack, and then go home and play the game, and that pack costs you, just cash, and then I can go play cards. And maybe I have a Black Lotus card, and I go sell that on eBay for $110,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is exactly NFTs.
Yeah.
That's exactly the whole NFT market. And the fact that I can go sell that Black Lotus card on eBay or on any number of open markets is the great thing about the blockchain. It's not just constrained to one single place.
Yeah.
The fact that the open markets do exist and that it's an unwalled garden is also great. Also very dangerous, and there are people who take advantage of that as well. But oh my God, these automatic lights are going to kill me. But yeah, I think it is very early, and so I think as more people start to embrace where we are, we start to see Hot Wheels come in, we start to see Funko come in, the NBA's in, the Matrix NFTs came out this week on Wax. It's all getting to be more and more. Every commercial seems to have NFTs attached to it right now, and it's this high volume noise. I think it'll calm down and just become kind of ordinary. I really hope it becomes ordinary. I really hope it becomes just like the noise goes away. I think that's kind of important right now.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting now with like the speed of communication and social networks, like how fast a movement can now happen, and how fast, like relatively speaking, something like NFTs have perforated sort of more mass media and these corporations from, more niche to like now, major.
I mean, you had made the speculation, Jim, a while back that NFTs could be the potential way that DLC and purchasable content for video games could go. And Ubisoft just added NFTs to Rainbow Six.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see, since the gaming community is sort of a little bit afraid of change and anything that can look like a money grab. I think we'll see pushback. But almost all monetization steps have always had pushback. Whether it's like DLC or loot crates or any sort of path, even like free to play models. So that one was interesting because people hate spending money. So free to play is like, oh, I can play it for free. That one I think went over fairly well. Well, we have 5 questions, Graeme, that we ask all of our guests. And so I'm going to pull out my cheat sheet and we're going to ask you a few questions. And while I'm getting that, I would love to hear about what you find special about Origins. Like what makes you excited about the project that you feel like you want to share with people, or you're excited for them to experience?
I think the thing that excites me about the other game is that it's a very fun game, but it's something that begins to retell the story of a narrative universe that's kind of funny. There's so many cyberpunk universes out there that are deep dystopian. Oh my God, this future is gritty and horrible, and Cyberpunk 2077 and and the Matrix are good examples of those futures. There's enough of those. In 1987, I made a game that was kind of Douglas Adams funny, and I'm really glad to be able to bring that future back and start to tell that story, and start to tell an expansive narrative story with a community that is coming along. And our community is growing, so much so we had to hire a community manager. It was like, we're going to have to hire a community manager before launch.
That's great.
And to see that happen, to see someone latch on to what you're doing and say, hey, tell us more lore, tell us more story, and to be playing the game, that was incredibly humbling. And that's something that I wanted to do for my entire career. And that's to see now that beginning to happen is that has been absolutely incredible.
That's amazing to hear. I mean, that early adoption is so critical, and hearing you talk about sharing the narrative. If I'm thinking of Magic or another trading card game, you get little bits of lore sometimes, like the italic writing on the card. What is the medium that you think you'll be able to share the lore? Is it through their website? Is it via the cards? How are people absorbing this?
We've we actually added a little bit of italic writing on some of the cards because we noticed throughout beta that people were starting to get attached to certain cards. They were getting attached to Charlie 14 and they were getting attached to Lone Wolf. And so it's like, well, let's start to tell the stories.
Yeah.
So people got more attached to those cards. Starting next month, we're actually starting a web comic that'll be on the website with weekly updates. And then yesterday we announced Faction Wars, which is we have 3 factions in our game: the government faction, the underground faction, and the corporate faction. And so war is actually breaking out in the future between the 3 factions, with some terribly comedic problem that starts it all.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that there's sources for people if they just want to keep it surface level. They like the game mechanic, they want to play. Maybe they don't even read the italic, but at least they have that on the cards, or they can get into the webcomic and they can choose to go as deeply as they want. I think that's great to give people the opportunity to choose their level of engagement. Okay, so I'm going to dive into our 5 questions. So in your opinion, what is the metaverse?
I thought about this a lot. It's not what everyone thinks it is. Everyone thinks the metaverse is jumping into something in VR or AR and suddenly being in a different world. And that's, to me, is just a pile of junk. The metaverse, to me, is connecting everything together and having my Uber app understand my Amazon app, understanding my email app, and having the operating system rewrite happen from the bottom up, connecting everything together so that I can make that narrative work throughout everything I'm doing every single day, so that if I do want Harry Potter world or Star Wars world or dog world, that everything I do application wise in the world, whether it's email, calling an Uber, going to the movies, in line at Starbucks, can become part of that narrative universe automatically because of the operating system choices that are being made. And no one is doing any work there at all because everyone is focusing on the graphical user interface of the metaverse and no one is working on the foundations of the metaverse.
Right. Yeah, the interoperability is kind of the word you see a lot, but mostly talked more about like an avatar moving between experiences. But you're sort of describing almost interoperability between just software and apps and digital content. Very, very interesting.
Nobody wants to talk about the hard part.
Well, everyone thinks the metaverse is just an application.
Yep. It's not. It's the connectivity of all the applications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Devin, I'll let you read. Well, we'll switch off. You take number 2.
Okay. What is the coolest tech you expect to see within the next 5 years?
I really think that pass-through technology will actually become real. I think two things. I think that the pass-through technology that I can wear on my head will become real, and it will become something that I can wear for quite a long time. And there will be applications in it that I find useful. That's perhaps the most key thing. Because if there isn't applications I can find useful, then why do I put it on?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think display technology, that we're all using right now, and you can see me on in the middle there, will become much better than they are right now, and will start to become 3-dimensional.
Yep.
Yeah, we could have you sitting at the table with us right here, which would be awesome.
And that'll happen once you blend those technologies together, because you'll have the display that's on your head that kind of, it is pass through, but it's also not pass through, and it can decide whether or not to render somebody in 3D and a proper representation of them.
Yeah, well, and we could have the show recorded live, and people could just show up and watch it in their headsets. So that's fun.
Filmed in front of a live virtual audience.
A live virtual audience, yeah.
But 3D, but also 3D without glasses is going to become possible too. So that's one of the big things that's going to start happening.
As you were describing some of your vision, Graham, I was imagining when you're saying sort of like pass through and convenient apps, even though this isn't so much useful, it still sounded fun. The idea of like reskinning your world of like, I want all, it's like you have different skins of Minecraft, right? So
Yeah,
it's like, all right, I want the, fantasy version. So grass is still grass, but now it looks like big and luscious.
yeah,
And my sidewalk now it looks like a dirt path. And
yeah.
so it's like you still know you're on the sidewalk, but now it looks different. It's a fun idea. Okay, what number three? What tech do you expect to fail in the next 5 years?
Anything connected to, uh, I think Section 230 is going to become amended, and I think social networks will become much weaker. And I think anything that is connected to social networks will start to fail in more and more ways that they will start to weaken. So I think that's one of my big worries about the future, especially as we all enter into more of a metaversey world. How do we protect our privacy? How do we protect who we are? How do we protect and respect boundaries? And I think there's a bunch of 70-year-old white men are deciding that right now, and that's exactly the wrong problem.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, because it seems like the whole point of a social network is to connect us. And if the metaverse becomes very mainstream and advances over the years, there's no point to have an app that does it if all the apps are interconnected.
Yep.
Well, let's have our Bill of Rights for the metaverse first.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, we need some founding
than,
fathers for the metaverse.
Rather than just laws that protect corporations, where's the Bill of Rights for the people in the metaverse?
All right. Question number 4. What is your favorite interactive experience?
There's so many of them. I thought about this all the time. And for me, it's that game that I play, because I'm a game designer, so it's going to be a game, right? So, and for me, over the years, it's always been a game. And as a game designer, when you play a game, you often see the Excel sheet,
right?
Because every game is just basically an Excel sheet at its core. There's numbers flying off, and eventually the numbers become 0 and the person dies. But some games, quite a few games, the best games, you don't see the numbers anymore, and all you see is the game and the narrative, and you see something else. You are in the world. You're actually there, and there's very few games that actually achieve that for me, because most of the time I see the freaking numbers, and it's just
the curse of being the creator.
Yeah.
But a game that did that for me this year was actually Valheim, which was
beautiful
made by a really small team, but it's also, oh my God, the first time I went into the woods and saw a troll, I was running away from that woods all the way back to my base. I had no idea if the troll was running after me or not.
True immersion. Yeah, it's hard to come by, especially when you know how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? You see past the curtain, so that's great.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's not a great AR experience, but
that's okay. Yeah, we love making games. So we at Devhouse, we do most of our client work comes in the kind of XR, AR, VR space, with flavors of gamification. But then on our sort of like, you always hear Google's 20% time, and in that we like to build video games, and oftentimes those don't have anything to do with AR or VR. We love game development, and all of us kind of came from that world, and then discovered, hey, with these game development tools, we can help businesses and help clients and help people that need it. Okay, so question 5. What interactive experience would you like to see? So something maybe that doesn't exist that you kind of wish would.
I can tell you the greatest pitch of a game I gave that wasn't made, and I really want it to be made still. And it's a game called Ghost Girl, and basically it's an AR game, and it's a pass-through game that you play with pass-through on, and it's about a ghost that lives with you in your house. And so you start playing Ghost Girl, and a Ghost Girl has these wooden cubes that it comes with, and the wooden cubes are teaching you how to communicate words. But in the next room of your house, you start to see a light form, and then sounds, and light comes from the door. And eventually the light becomes so bright, you have to go to the room and take a look. and there standing in the middle of your dining room is Alice, the ghost. And she looks directly at you because we know where your head pose is and we know where your eye pose is, and she points at you, and then she points behind you at the floor behind you, and you look behind you on the floor, and there on the floor is the outline of a dead body. And you're like, what the heck? And you look back and there's and Alice is gone, and in your ear you hear, will you help me? And you remember you have these wooden cubes, and you can start to explore, starting to communicate with Alice. And you discover that Alice is housebound. She can't go past the boundary of your house. And one day she comes to you and she says, Graeme, my brother walks by at midnight every night past the house. Will you go out at midnight and tell my brother that I love him? And you're like, sure. Of course I'll do that, because I'm been on adventures with you now. And so you wait up till midnight and you go outside into the street and you see a ghost walking down the street. It's Alice's brother. And you look to the door and there's Alice standing in the door, and she's egging you on, and the ghost stops in front of you, and Alice wants you to know that she loves you still, and the ghost thanks you and moves on. And I've made a game that makes you wait up until midnight, walk out into the middle of your street wearing a headset, and stop in front of an invisible ghost that no one else can see, and say that the invisible ghost that you tell in front of your that lives with you loves you. And that gives you a story the next morning when you go into work of, what did you do last night? It's better than I watched CSI. Well, I stayed up till midnight, and I had to go out into the street and say that the ghost that lives with, wait, you have a ghost that lives with you? Yeah, I have a ghost that lives with me called Alice. It's a long story. And, but her brother walks by the street, every night at midnight. What, her brother?
I love it for there's a lot of cool things about that, but two things stand out that I think are really special. One, and this is a less like sexy thing, but the fact that these technologies kind of have a holography element, playing into that as ghosts really works well, because that's a sort of immersion breakers. Sometimes you're looking through these HoloLens or Magic Leaps, and the things look kind of hologrammy and see-through. So, oh, perfect, it's a ghost. Now I don't have that immersion breaking. And the other thing is, anytime there is, I think, things you can discover by doing real life steps is really cool. Like, I love the idea. It's like, if you go out at midnight, an event will occur. It's like, you have to, especially if it's somewhat shrouded, like it's not handed to you, but you kind of discern that, I think she's saying he comes by at night. So let me just kind of every so often check, and you discover it. You feel smart, right? Anytime a game makes you feel smart and you discover something, I think that's always, it's like, you want to feel powerful or smart, are like the often two like levers you can pull for human emotion. And so that's, I think that sounds fun. That would be awesome to play. Okay, so we got through our questions. I really loved your answers. I think hopefully someone will go make Ghost Girl, and we can all experience Alice, and we can solve her presumed murder. I mean, if we see the chalk line, something happened there. So
something happened.
Yes. Well, Graeme, you've done a lot of really cool things, and I have a hunch people who watch this might say, man, I want to ask him a question, or see what he's up to these days, depending on when they watch the episode. What's the best way for someone to follow what you do, or to get a hold of you? Which social media, or what's the best platform?
Oh, Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. And at Zaphod, GJG. So Zaphod, like from Hitchhikers, then my initials, GJD.
And we'll add that in the description too, so people can just click it.
Yep, that's me. You'll see me talk about my dog a lot.
Wonderful.
But I always try to answer people's questions about games, because I love helping people with games and getting people, and just chatting to anyone in the industry. So yeah, hit me up.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Graeme. I'm really excited to see Origin come out and play it myself. And so I would love to probably pull you back on, when it's further through development and you have some user feedback, and we can hear how it's going. But until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Graeme. So Devin, what would you say? We talked a little bit. We talked with Austin in another episode, who works with Graeme about game design. Today we talked a little bit more about how it works with some of these immersive technologies. What do you think would be a really cool thing for people to explore when they're sort of doing, let's say VR? I think we already talked about AR a bit. Like, hey, what's a VR thing that you would like to see people think about or work on?
Oh, I'm so dug into the VR
physics.
Yeah, VR
I was
physics
like, I bet he's gonna
space.
say
Yeah,
physics.
that I just want to find. It doesn't have to be physics. I just
Yeah.
want to see people kind of break the rules and find more ways to trick the brain into being more immersed in these experiences.
Yeah.
I find that these technologies are all about the next level of interaction with immersive technology. So like, first we had movies and books and all of these consumed medias that were kind of just one sense, and VR takes the next step of you can see it, you can hear it, and now we're going to try and fake that you can touch it.
Yeah.
And
well, it's spatial, right? So
Yeah.
like we've had 2D screens, but now we have a 3-dimensional, which is also a brain trick of like believing it's 3D. But now we believe and we're confident when we put on a headset that, yeah, I'm in 3D space. I can tell how far away that is. And so the next step, I think, is like haptics, right? Getting haptics so you can touch it, even, so we don't have to rely too much on brain tricks, but like feeling something.
The moment we stop actually like tricking the brain and start actually giving real feedback, that'll be a game changer.
Right. And I love, the Void, they have other external stuff like fans, and I know it's like so cheesy and like a futuristic thing that you see on like sci-fi, but like smell-o-vision, right? It's like that could be it sounds complicated and maybe like it could be abused or weird, but the idea of like you walk into a field of flowers and you can smell them. I've been using a boxing app, and it opens up in VR on this like mountain hilltop that's like green and beautiful, and I want to feel the wind and I want to like smell fresh air. Just the visuals almost get me there, but if I could get that whole thing, that would be huge. Yeah. So, well, yeah, there's a lot of areas to explore, a lot of things that we can do in this new medium, and the more opportunities that companies like Meta and some of these larger companies who have the financial means to keep putting them out, like Horizon is from Meta. I think it helps the industry as a whole and gives us kind of space to play in and be creative. So, well, keep tuning in. We're going to keep doing lots of these episodes and interviewing some cool folks. Obviously, Graeme has a really impressive resume, and we've played a lot of his games growing up and still today. So, follow us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, and then we're also on Spotify and we're on also Apple. So, until next time, this is the Devhouse.
Oh, let me add one more.
Yes.
One more. Because we need to start doing this.
Okay.
If you have an idea of somebody that you might want to see on the podcast or something you'd like us to discuss, please, on any of the various platforms that you might be consuming us on, put a comment somewhere. Let us know what you think.
Yep. No, that's good. Yeah, because we're currently polling a lot of our guests from colleagues and people that we've met in the industry, and it'd be great to get access to sort of other circles of people that we maybe don't personally connect with. So
this also gives us a great way to interact with the next news piece that we might find out about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Good idea.
Sweet.
All right. Until next time.
Perfect.